I am Tim Shirley, the senior minister of the SouthShore United Church of Christ. This is a sermon for August 30th. The matter of the matter, a matter that matters. What's the matter? Why all the fuss? Why all the social unrest? Why all the confusion and consternation? What are we doing? Or perhaps more importantly, are not doing? Why are we in this predicament? What is the matter? And therein is the heart of the matter that matters, the matter of the matter, what seems to be the only matter that matters at the moment. Not counting that pesky pandemic nuisance, never far removed from our minds. Matter that. What are we thinking in the name of all that is good and right and just as a nation as we struggle to find any semblance of sanity, any equilibrium of the social order, looking desperately for the soul of our nation? Why are we struggling so? Where did we go wrong? As if a pandemic were not enough to occupy our time and obsess our minds, we have added layer upon layer of problematic issues to which there seems to be no resolution. We are faced with some serious problems as a country, as a people, and specifically as Christian people. And we must find solutions, and yes, resolution. If not now, when? If not us, who? We are in a crisis moment unlike many, if any, we have ever faced together on such a grand scale. As I begin this sermon, I must confess that the topics driving our national dialogue, the unrest revealed in so many appropriate and inappropriate ways, put a preacher in proverbial no man's land. For many, these issues are a no-fly zone, off limits, too controversial, too political, landmines abounding. As a preacher, you are often damned if you do and damned if you don't. It is the nature of the beast. Don't sign up if you can't take the heat. So today, I choose to do. And we're off and running. The lection from the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans, coincidentally, a spot-on text for today's holy conversation, most relevant for our immediate purposes, does an excellent job of encouraging his people, and therefore all of us, during a time of great unrest and upheaval. Unlike Paul's other congregations who lived and served within the orbit of their Hellenistic confines, their Greek culture, the church at Rome was literally at ground zero, directly in the shadow of a relentlessly oppressive occupier. The Jews had long lived under the tyranny of Rome's heavy thumb, subject to huge taxes and religious restraints, all of which combined made it nearly impossible to function with any sense of normalcy in their given lives. Always under threat, always under siege, always blamed, always conveniently scapegoated. Fall guys all, an always convenient, readily available target, an easy excuse for the foibles and foolishness of the powers and principalities in authority, the power mongers, power wielders who held a firm grip on what was often an uncivilized civilization. The strain on a society constantly living in fear and anxiety, the stress of the constant and cumulative whip of persecution, incessantly invasive afflictions of terror and torture. Wow, what a great way to live. In today's epistle lection, Paul provides for his original audience and therefore vicariously for us a template by which we should live as followers of Jesus. Despite his oft-abrasive and sometimes confusing and confounding commentary, there are other times when Paul is not only crystal clear, but his words reflect the need for goodness and grace that is commensurate with the gospel. This text is a reminder of Paul's softer side, a kinder and gentler Paul. Unlike some material we find elsewhere in the Pauline epistles, these admonitions are much easier to digest. Living under a veil of immense evil, desperately hiding within the dark valleys of death's shadow. Images once made so crystal clear, so vivid in the 23rd Psalm. These early Christians under Paul's care and leadership were under a constant barrage, driven by a pervasive threat hell-bent on their undoing, their complete and utter demise. Rather than being angry and vengeful, Paul recommends that the faithful find another path, a better way forward, that ironically and painfully, strangely advocates for embracing the coming certainty of doom by accepting this evil faith with compassion and, yes, grace. Still a hard way to go. No doubt it was a hard pill to swallow. Paul begins this part of his letter by admonishing his Roman reader to love without pretending, without the pretension that is so often unfortunately hardwired in so many constructs of human relationships. Paul then tells them to hate evil and cling to that which is good, to hold on tight. Love each other like members of your family, he says. The apostle even has the audacity to tell them to be enthusiastic despite their challenges, for they have been blessed with, given the ultimate gift of the Spirit, permeating their spirits, piercing their very souls. Not unlike the swords that came for many of them. In a way, he was saying to these believers that they had something at their ready disposal. They possessed a secret knowledge their adversary lacked, a fire that burned deep within them, able to sustain and give a certain level of comfort to them. Happiness comes through hope, not in hate. And it is in that eternal promise that kept them going, that gave them the stamina, assuring them they could and must endure and stand firm while maintaining a semblance of the resolve needed to sustain what surely at times, at least on occasion, was a frail and fragile, a wavering and waffling spiritual equilibrium as they face the certainty of personal and collective calamity of devastation, destruction, and doom. They were not robots devoid of deepest feelings and the influence of the strongest emotions imaginable. simply going through the motions, benignly meandering through their maudlin, their macabre machinations. No, they were real flesh and blood human beings, their experiences not at all numbed by the efficacy of their faith in God and their trust in Christ. Paul then reminds the Roman church of their larger responsibility to willingly give to those in the community who had need, to welcome strangers into their home. Yes, hospitality is always clearly on display. Bless everyone, especially those who harass you and seek to do so much unimaginable harm to you. Show empathy and sympathy, always warranted, being happy with those who are happy and crying with those who are crying. How hard is that? Dare to walk in another's shoes. A mile or more can't hurt. And then he offers a line that gets to the heart of the matter, the heart of our matter. Consider everyone as equal, and don't think that you're better than anyone else. Yes, we are all level at the foot of the cross. Well, I could stop right here, because here is where our myriad monumental problems lie. This is when we become our own worst enemy. But Paul goes on, and therefore so shall I. Black lives matter. What is it about that phrase, that tagline that has become so political, politicized beyond any rational degree, so ironically so divisive? Unfortunately, to the point that the issue that is gravely at stake, driving much emotion and passion, gets lost in the minutiae of a cacophony of dissonant, discordant opinions. Many folks, and let's just name the elephant in the room, many white folks cannot bring themselves to utter these starkly sobering words without a disclaimer, qualifier. If they do manage to mouth them, they can only do so with a caveat. They must soften the argument by quickly following this declaration with the pronouncement that all lives matter. As if we did not get that or know that, and as if something somehow is conveniently missing if we do not clarify for all to hear. What is blatantly missing when we timidly yield to our insecurities and our internal need to do that is the point. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, white privilege is real and has been a part of our country's fabric, woven into our national tapestry since the founding of this one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To be honest, we have always struggled to celebrate our diversity, to own it. When our founding fathers declared that all men are created equal, as sexist as that statement was and is, accidentally or not, they were by design and intent not including our African American brothers and sisters, slaves all, derogatorily and demonstratively declared to be 3/5 human. Unbelievable. Unacceptable. Over the course of a 200-year strong and going experiment, it appears that all those dubiously suppressed prejudicial chickens seem to have now come home to roost all at once. The tenor of the tension showing in the quick and sustained response which is equaling and and might even surpass the clarion days of the civil rights movement. Hard to believe. We can either ostrich our way around this by sticking our heads in the sands and pretend that it will all magically just go away, like many pretend to do with coronavirus. Or we can declare that enough is enough and begin the hard work of reconciliation, all of us together enacting various forms of reparations while seeking to build bridges and stop the growing madness. Whatever this crisis of conscience and country is, it sure ain't no hoax. Interestingly, perhaps ironically, I began writing these words on the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington, D.C., where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered perhaps his greatest sermon. Once again, thousands under the leadership of the Reverend Al Sharpton gathered on the Mall to address systemic racism, the blatant abuse of power that is exhibited by some outlaw members of law enforcement. I concluded this sermon as I watched in horror the residual of this past weekend. A spectrum of rhetoric, emotion, peaceable protests, and the riotous behavior of violent reactionaries. A very volatile mix indeed. Special focus was given to specific events that unfolded in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Portland, Oregon, and close to home in Tallahassee, Florida. April Ryan, CNN's White House correspondent, even declared that as of this weekend's meltdown, we are now in a race war. Scary when you think about it. Sadly, some have predicted this. Sadder still, others, like these Boogaloo bozos, a group opposed to and seeking to undermine the federal government and who are desperately trying to instigate a race war, bringing complete and total chaos to fruition. Our toxic environment currently has encouraged, even empowered these crazies to crawl out from under their rocks and move about freely and unbound, unhindered in the least. How helpful to our national discourse, civic dialogue. Despicable. Just nuts. Stupid people. And you cannot fix stupid. Ignorant, backwards, uneducated, ill-informed. Nothing worse, politically, religiously, or socially, than narrow-minded sectarian bigots. These three societal influences, politics, religion, and society, are always usually, or most usually, hardwired together, coming as one, a package deal. They may be the death of us all if we do not get our act together. They may very well become the demise, the doom and destruction of civilization as we know it and enjoy it. Who doesn't wistfully long for the segregationist lost cause of the Dixie antebellum South of the 1800s Confederacy? Not me. Hopefully not you. Nothing great about it. That dog won't hunt. That flag won't fly. Seriously. And whatever happened to the Constitution? Frankly, the only race war we better be fighting and winning is a battle for the American version of the human race, lest we all perish in so many sadly horrific ways. Last weekend's events were marked by peaceful protest and lawless rioting, polarities unleashed on the populace. A 17-year-old equipped with an assault rifle. How did he get his hands on that? Crossed state lines and shot 2 bystanders or protesters. Human beings nonetheless. All this self-deputized nonsense. Where were his parents? Did he learn this disgusting behavior from them? Grown men behaving like little boys, but with real rather than toy guns. Sick. Who knows the intents and purposes of the victims? Who cares? There is no indication that they were a legitimate threat to anyone. One was packing a skateboard. Nothing says danger, deadly weapon like a skateboard. For all we know, they were just bystanders, checking out the scene. Imagine vigilantes disguised as militias, militias masquerading as vigilantes. My God, we are not living in a reincarnation of the Wild West, a bygone era shamelessly, mythologically glamorized by Hollywood on popular TV westerns. Some politicians and pundits even had the audacity to applaud this killer's heroics. Not a critical word to be found. I will out Tucker Carlson, who defended the actions of the kid, claiming that he alone was doing what others failed to do when no one else would. What an idiot. Instigator extraordinaire. Some opinions are best kept to yourself. Those who do not condone. Inevitably so. And by the way, think about it. Just what were we doing at 17 years of age? I'll bet we were still playing, not packing and or praying. P-R-E-Y. As a part of the United Church of Christ, we boldly and proudly characterize ourselves as a compassionate and caring church, deeply concerned and committed, helpfully obsessed about social justice, while finding ways to initiate good practice into our congregations, our larger community, and our global society. We desperately need less heat, less rhetoric, less denial and dishonesty, and demand more than a modicum of common sense, common decency, and the common good. We are experiencing right now the height of a crisis of conscience, a crisis of faith. Once again, if not now, when? If not us, who? We have no choice as faithful Christians but to answer this clarion call. Jesus, through the recalibrated and retrofitted lens of the early church, implored his followers to take up their cross. A reminder that everyone's perspective and reality is unique to their circumstances and situations. We are called to take up our cross and not someone else's. But maybe, just maybe, we need to reconsider that one. More than willing to share the heavy load with others, the expectations for whom, unreasonable as they have been, forced to carry more than their fair share, a cross far greater than any human capacity, far beyond any average person's capability. For many of us, our cross has been far and unfairly lighter. Just ask a person of African American descent. Systemic racism is no doubt the cross in our past and present crosshairs. May it not be so in the future. Just this week, various professional sports leagues took the unprecedented step of taking a step back, a temporary boycott to make the strongest of statements. Those who follow and enjoy such pastimes have taken notice and notice that we are now living in a new day, a different day, a day that demands that we stop and take stock of the living of these days. Prayerfully, perhaps on the cusp of a new day dawning, something profoundly different on humanity's horizon. There is something afoot, real and not a real and not imagined movement. Recent events galvanizing persons of all stripes and walks of life, red and yellow, black and white. Sing it with me. We have the capacity to find the solutions to these complex problems, but the task and the process will not be easy. Yes, there are racists living among us still, and they are having a field day in the current toxic environment. It is what it is. So yes, there will be backlash and opposition, and even continued denial that if those people would just get with the program and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, everything would turn out just fine. All would be well. Nothing of significance ever comes that easily. Systemic challenges always demand systemic responses. Perhaps we must begin with some baby steps. Asking police not to be so quick-triggered to shoot, and rioters not to loot. A baseline of behavior that would make a huge difference, have a ginormous impact. Lawlessness only serves to create even more divisiveness, bringing about the opposite of desired results. Ultimately, the only outcome is an unwanted one, turning initially positive opinions, empathy, and sympathy into negative commentary. Unfortunately, this phenomenon is happening in many locales where violence has seized the day and predominated as a reactionary rather than responsive behavior. We must rebuild, if not build for the first time, trust on all sides, abolishing all sides in the process. Violence is never the answer, never acceptable under any circumstances, even the worst imaginable. Yes, blue lives matter too. It is a dangerous and often thankless career. But law enforcement must develop better boundaries and practices, quit hiding behind irresponsibly protective unions, overprotective, and own their responsibility to the communities they serve, and be held accountable by their constituents while holding themselves accountable for their actions. Like many in public service, no matter their preference or arguments to the contrary, law enforcement officers and officials are held to a higher standard. Just ask Jerry Falwell Jr. Couldn't help myself. Too many African American citizens have been senselessly gunned down in moments of emotional anxiety and physical panic, and in some cases, apparent intent. Yes, we can all acknowledge that the fear is real and palpable for those whose duty it is to serve us. Of that we have no doubt as observers, outsiders of the mysterious blue wall, the code of silence. The litany of victims, however, is far too long and represents an unacceptable pattern. We need to and must personalize each victim by knowing their names and calling each one, lamenting the loss of any and every human life. But in the final analysis, that is cosmetics, polite verbiage that is nothing more than a band-aid of sorts, albeit an important one. What we must have is a change of heart and mind as a people. And the impetus is on the white side of the ledger to make a first, second, and third move and show that we really do desire a change in the systemic structures that subtly and subliminally, obviously and obnoxiously have framed our national dialogue and the lack thereof. Jim Wallace of Sojourners names the proverbial white elephant in the room. He says it is problematic when we talk of white Christians, adding, when the adjective cancels the noun, we have a problem. He is oh so very right in his assessment. The very institutional fabric of our national experiment, a shining city on a hill, a little or a lot tarnished at the moment, hangs in the balance, precariously held in all our precious hands. It is up to all of us, not just some. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers, and that axiom goes both ways and every way imaginable. Yes, Black lives matter. And okay, yes, all lives matter. Relationships matter. You and I matter. Until our country becomes the beloved community articulated by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and advocated and advanced by John Lewis. Let's agree to get in some good trouble, as he called it. It is necessary. It is expected. It is required. It is not optional. As individuals and as a church, let's demand that freedom reign and that social justice become part and parcel of every aspect of our Christian calling and our beloved faith community as we seek to create the realm of God on earth, reflecting the great banquet feast envisioned by Jesus. An inviting place with a prepared place at the table for everyone, where everyone is welcome, accepted, and affirmed, no matter who they are or where they are on life's journey. The tent must be broad and wide and ever expanding. That is who we are as a country. Yes, a country of immigrants, always gladly welcoming the other, the tired and the poor from every huddled mass. We must, invoking the theme of the great Negro spiritual, overcome our present circumstances. May justice roll down like waters. Is it too much to ask? Time's wasting. In the name of the one who creates, redeems, and sustains, and for the millionth time has created us all imago Dei, in the very exacting image of God, and desires us to live as one, together in unity and harmony, celebrating the diversity that comes in a beautiful tapestry, a spectrum of colors creating one awesomely fine kaleidoscope of an absolutely gorgeous and stunning humanity. Amen and amen.